The night was not supposed to be this cruel, but here it was, tearing itself open with rain so cold it felt like needles, slicing through the air, hammering against the ground, washing the world in silver and shadow. She ran through it anyway, barefoot, bleeding, breaking. The forest swallowed her whole, as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see how much more she could endure before she finally collapsed. The mud clung to her feet like hands trying to drag her back. Branches snapped against her arms, her shoulders, her legs. Sharp reminders that she was not supposed to be here, not supposed to be alive, not supposed to outrun what hunted her. But she kept running, because stopping meant death. And death, right now, felt too easy. Her breath tore out of her chest in short, ragged bursts. Every inhale tasted like panic. Every exhale felt like something inside her was cracking. Her heart wasn't beating normally anymore. It was pounding, wild, frantic, desperate. Not like a heart trying to keep her alive, but like a beast trapped inside her ribcage, slamming itself against bone, begging to break free. The night vibrated with danger. Behind her, somewhere between the twisting black trees, something growled, low, rumbling, hungry. It echoed through the forest like a warning or a promise. She didn't dare look back. She already knew what she would see. Eyes, not human, not merciful, glowing with the kind of hunger that had stalked her since childhood. The kind of hunger that never let her go. Rain plastered her hair to her face, stinging the cuts on her cheeks. She wiped at them, but more kept coming. Rain, tears, blood. It was hard to tell them apart anymore. Her ribs throbbed, her legs shook, her lungs felt like they were filling with fire. But she forced herself forward, stumbling through the underbrush, crashing between thick roots and slick stones that threatened to throw her down again and again. Another growl, closer this time. Her pulse jumped violently. She pushed harder, even though her body was screaming at her to stop. Because she could feel it, the air shifting behind her as if something massive that sliced through it. Something fast, something that wanted her. A branch whipped across her shoulder. She gasped, more in shock than pain, but didn't slow down. She couldn't. Not tonight. Her foot slipped in the mud, sending her sprawling forward. She caught herself on her palms, but sharp stones bit into her skin. Silver sparks flickered across her fingers. Tiny, frantic bursts of light that crawled under her skin like living fire. Not now, not now, not now. She clenched her hands, trying to force the sparks away, but they only grew brighter. Thin streaks of silver racing up her wrists, burning her veins with a heat that stole her breath. Her body spasmed. She hit the ground on her knees, choking on a sound that wasn't quite a cry and wasn't quite a growl. "Not now," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please, not now." Her vision blurred as more sparks crawled up her arms, her neck, her jaw. Too bright, too wild, too wrong. Her shift was coming, but not the kind she could control, not the kind anyone had taught her how to handle. It was the dangerous one, the broken one, the one that could tear her apart from the inside. Her head fell forward as she tried to breathe through it. Cold mud soaked into her knees. Rain beat against the back of her neck. The forest buzzed with movement, creatures pulling back, watching from the shadows, sensing the unstable power leaking out of her. She felt sick, dizzy, weak, And then, something even worse. A memory, sharp, sudden, unforgiving. It hit her like a slap to the chest, so vivid it tore through time, as if the past itself refused to stay buried. She was small again, fragile, ribs showing through thin, dirty skin, her clothes damp from sleeping outside, her lips cracked from thirst. She remembered standing in front of a man at the marketplace, clutching the hem of her torn dress, staring at his food like it was the sun. Her voice had been so tiny back then, so soft it barely belonged to a living child. "Buy my food, sir. Mom hasn't given me food in 3 days." There was no tremble in her voice. She had been too numb for that. Just emptiness. Just hunger, deeper than her bones. She remembered how the man's face twisted, first in pity, then in discomfort, then in that familiar disgust people always wore around her. She remembered how he didn't help, how no one did. And she remembered how cold she felt, how invisible, how unwanted. That same cold swept through her body now, years later, as the memory cracked open inside her, like a wound she had spent her whole life trying to ignore. Her body shook violently, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from that old hunger, the hunger that never left, even after she grew, even after she fought, even after she tried to forget. The forest blurred around her. Her breath turned sharp, quick, desperate. The silver light flickered uncontrollably beneath her skin. Her adult body, stronger, scarred, hardened, curled in on itself with the same helplessness she felt as a child. Her fingers dug into the mud, her jaw clenched, her heartbeat roared in her ears. Behind her, the growls grew louder, closer, circling, but she couldn't move. Not yet. The memory rooted her to the earth like chains. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to push it away, trying to swallow it whole. But the pain only grew sharper. Her voice cracked as she whispered into the storm, "Please, stop." Not to the forest, not to the rain, not even to the monster hunting her, but to the memory, to the past that refused to let her go. Her shoulders shook as she fought to pull air into her lungs. She tried again to shift, her wolf clawing under her skin, but the sparks only flashed brighter, burning her wrists, her throat, her chest. She wasn't ready. She wasn't strong enough. Not tonight. She bit down on a sob and forced her shaking body forward. An inch, then another. The ground trembled under heavy footsteps. Her heart seized. She didn't look back. Couldn't. Her voice barely rose above the storm as she whispered, "Move!" But her body didn't obey. She was shaking too hard. Her power was too unstable. And the memory of that starving child clung to her like frost, locking her joints, freezing her breath, dragging her backward through time. Rain poured harder, turning the forest into a maze of shadows and silver streams. A crack of thunder split the sky. The growls behind her deepened, thickened, turning into guttural snarls that vibrated through the ground. She gasped, her entire body jolting as if someone had pressed a blade to the back of her neck. She knew that sound. She knew what it meant. They were close enough to pounce. Her fingers curled into the mud. Her body braced instinctively. But her wolf didn't rise. The sparks only flickered again. Weak, trembling, frightened, broken, just like she had been as a child. Her breath hitched. The hunger in her chest grew sharper. An ache that wasn't physical, but emotional. A need she had never been able to satisfy. A need for help, for safety, for warmth, for someone, anyone, to choose her. But the world had never chosen her before. The forest pressed in around her, thick with mist, cold and merciless. The storm roared overhead, and she whispered again, barely audible through the rain, "Not now, please." Her voice cracked. Her body trembled violently. Her heartbeat stuttered. Another memory flashed, her mother shutting the door in her face as she begged for food. The cold night pressing against her back, her stomach hollow, her hands numb, her voice too weak to scream. Silver sparks flared again, brighter now, blinding for a second. Her wolf snarled inside her, but not in anger, in pain. And then, a final growl behind her, close enough to feel the heat of breath on her spine. She froze, completely. The forest went silent. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths as she waited, helpless, shaking, drowning in the past, and trapped in the present. She swallowed hard, tasting mud and blood and rain, and whispered, I can't do this again." The wind stole her words, but the forest heard. The storm heard. The thing behind her heard. And it moved. Before we go any deeper into her story, before we unravel what hunts her, before we witness what rises inside her, don't forget to subscribe to Velvet Romance Library. The storm seemed to recoil from him. Rain slackened, as if the sky itself feared pouring too hard upon the Alpha King. Wind broke against his shoulders, fragments of cold gusts scattering around him instead of across him. He stood anchored, as though the world itself revolved around the gravity of his presence. His cloak clung to his frame, heavy and dark, dripping rivulets that traced the sharp lines of muscle beneath. The gold in his eyes never wavered. It pierced through the fog, through the shadows, through her defenses, as if he'd been tracking her heartbeat long before he arrived. For a moment, the forest stilled. No breath, no rustle, no movement. Only his voice, low, rough-edged, pulled from some place he clearly wished didn't exist. "I warned you not to run alone." Not a reprimand, not dominance, a wound. She felt it before she understood it. His words carried something brittle beneath the power, something almost human. Her chest tightened painfully. She hated that part of her recognized it. She pushed against the ground, trying to rise. Mud slipped beneath her palms. Her legs trembled violently from exhaustion and blood loss. She tried again, but her body buckled. She didn't fall. He was already there. One arm braced around her waist, the other slid behind her shoulders. He moved with controlled precision, as if the mere thought of jostling her pain was intolerable. His scent, storm-soaked pine, iron resolve, and something darker, closed in around her until her lungs could barely decide whether to breathe or hold the moment still. She stiffened instinctively, her body preparing for another betrayal. But he didn't tighten his grip. He didn't force her closer. He simply held her steady, just enough to keep her from collapsing, just enough to remind her that he could shatter her escape with one hand, and yet wasn't doing it. Her pulse skittered. Confusion carved sharp edges through her fear. His eyes lowered to her throat, lingering on the bruised imprint left by the wolves that had attacked her. His jaw clenched so hard a faint tremor ran through the muscle. She felt it against her cheek, rage contained with unnatural restraint. She expected him to say something cruel or commanding. Instead, his voice dropped to a strain so quiet the storm nearly swallowed it. "Who touched you?" The question wasn't possessive. It was lethal. The fog shifted, and movement flickered between the trees. A ring of hostile wolves, fur slick with rain, eyes burning with predatory hunger, circled them. Their growls rippled through the dark like rolling thunder. She tensed. He didn't. The alpha lifted his head and gave them a single look. Nothing more than a sharp, golden glare cutting through the gloom. The wolves' snarls faltered. One whimpered. Another immediately dropped to its belly, tail between its legs. Then, the entire pack retreated, slipping back into the fog as if the forest had swallowed them whole. No challenge, no hesitation, only raw, instinctive fear. His gaze remained fixed in the direction they'd vanished long after they were gone. When he finally looked down at her again, something else flickered in his eyes. Something she didn't understand. "Why did you run?" he murmured. The question struck deeper than she expected. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said run. As though he'd chased the idea of her slipping out of his reach more times than he'd ever admit. She forced her voice through her shaking breath. "Because trusting anyone is suicide." His throat worked around a silent answer. Then he lifted her fully into his arms. She inhaled sharply, not from pain, but from the overwhelming heat of him. His body radiated a warmth that didn't belong to humans, or even wolves. It was something ancient, molten, as if fire lived beneath his skin. Her fingers brushed his chest instinctively, recoiling the moment her palm felt the rapid, fierce beat of his heart. It wasn't steady. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't the heart of an alpha king known for his unbreakable discipline. It beat like it recognized her. She didn't want that. She tried to push against him, but her strength flickered out like a dying ember. His arms tightened barely, just enough to keep her from hurting herself. "You're burning up," he murmured, tone shifting from steel to a low, reluctant softness. "I'm fine," she rasped. "You're not." Thunder cracked above them, lightning slicing white across the sky. The sound vibrated through his chest, into her bones, into the space where her heartbeat tangled dangerously with his. He began walking, not fast, not slow, purposeful, as if he'd decided long before he found her that he would carry her out of here, whether she wanted him to or not. Rain pattered against his skin, rolling off him in shimmering beads. Every step he took sank deeper into the earth, carving impressions that the storm couldn't wash away quickly enough. He walked like a creature who had fought too many battles to bother fearing another. She swallowed hard. "Put me down." "No." The word was simple, not dominating, just final, like the closing of a door she didn't have the strength to pry open. She hated him in that moment, hated the ease with which he dismissed her resistance, hated the storm for dimming around him, hated the enemy wolves for obeying him. Most of all, she hated the warmth that curled low in her chest at the realization that he came for her. No one ever had. That thought pierced deeper than claws. She turned her face away from him. His breath brushed her temple, a warm exhale that felt too close to comfort, too close to recognition. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You should have let them finish it." His grip locked, a surge of heat pulsing through the tension of his arms. "I don't allow fate to decide what I keep," he growled. The words struck her so hard, she almost forgot how to breathe. She felt his heartbeat kick violently when he said it, as if he'd revealed something he had never intended to. The forest thinned gradually, the trees parting to reveal a stretch of moonlit clearing. Rain softened into mist, clinging to his cloak in silver droplets. His pace remained steady, but his breathing shifted, slightly deeper, slightly less measured, almost as if carrying her was affecting him more than he wanted her to notice. Her fingers brushed against the side of his neck as she tried to reposition herself. His skin was hot, fever hot, and the moment her touch grazed him, his steps faltered, only for half a second. But she felt it. His breath hitched, his muscles tightened like a reflex he despised for slipping. Her hand jerked back, mortified at the thought of stirring something in him, something she didn't understand, something she wasn't ready for. But he didn't release her. He didn't even look away. Instead, his voice came out strained, as though forced through clenched teeth. "Don't apologize." She blinked. "I didn't. You were going to." He knew. Somehow, he always seemed to know. Thunder rumbled again, but softer, as though the storm had exhausted its rage. The Alpha King's boots sank into the damp earth with heavy, resolute steps that left impressions as deep as the silence stretching between them. Her voice finally broke it. "You said my name before I even spoke." His grip shifted fractionally, not possessive, but protective, as if the answer was a wound he couldn't shield fast enough. He didn't speak immediately. When he did, it was barely above a whisper. "I know you're sent," he said. "I knew it the moment you crossed into my land." She stiffened. "I never crossed intentionally." "That doesn't change what I am." "And what is that?" she whispered. His breath brushed her cheek, fever warm, almost trembling. "Bound," he murmured. She froze. He didn't elaborate, didn't clarify, just kept walking with a tension so heavy she felt it coil through her own muscles. The air thickened with something unmistakable, something ancient, forbidden, dangerous, something she wasn't ready to name. She forced herself to look forward, but her voice trembled. "Let me go." "No." "Why?" His jaw locked. The heat beneath his skin surged. His pulse hammered against her ribcage, where her body pressed to his. For the first time, she saw his control falter. His voice came out rough, frayed at the edges. "If I let you go," a breath, a war inside him. "I won't get you back." Her heart lurched violently. He pressed forward, the night folding around them like a cloak. The forest behind them whispered with the retreat of predators. Ahead, the path was dark, unknown, tangled with danger. Between his arms, she felt something shift. Her fear, his restraint, their breath tangled in a single storm. She didn't trust him. He didn't trust himself. But the bond, tightening in the space between them, didn't care about either. It pulled. It throbbed. It waited. And, as the Alpha King carried her deeper into his territory, deeper into the shadows where fate had already carved their names, the danger wasn't the darkness around them. It was the one rising quietly in their chests, growing, burning, becoming undeniable. The forest quieted around them, as if even the storm sensed the shift in the air. The Alpha King kept walking, boots sinking into the mud, his arms locked around her trembling body. But her mind was sliding somewhere else entirely, slipping past the present and falling backward, into the dark corners she had spent her whole life trying to outrun. It started with the same memory that always found her when she was weakest. A small girl, thin arms, bare feet, a hunger that scraped bone. No matter how many years passed, she could still taste the cold air of that day. Metallic, sharp, almost cruel in how it filled her chest without offering any warmth. The bakery's window had glowed golden behind her, the light spilling out like a promise she wasn't allowed to touch. Warm bread, soft rolls, sweet jam, everything she had watched other children point at, tug at, cry for, demand, receive. She remembered standing there, hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles burned white. She had whispered the question she practiced on the walk there, voice cracking mid-sentence from hunger and shame. "Buy my food, sir. Mom hasn't given me food in 3 days." She didn't look up when she said it. Looking up made it worse. Adults didn't like hungry eyes. They didn't like seeing themselves reflected in desperation. So she stared at the ground, toes curling against the stones, hoping the man would be different. He wasn't. He laughed, a short, uncomfortable laugh, as if her existence embarrassed him. "Go home to your mother," he muttered, stepping away. "This isn't my problem." The words lodged in her chest like a stone. They never left. People had passed by her in a blur, skirts brushing her ankles, boots splashing grimy puddles in her direction, conversations rising above her head like she was just noise. No one slowed, no one noticed, no one cared. That day taught her something she never forgot. Invisible kids stayed hungry. The narrator's voice softened, haunted. She survived off scraps after that, half-eaten apples thrown beside market stalls, crusts tossed to the ground, whatever she could find before the rats did. Her mother would disappear for days at a time, returning with excuses that dissolved the moment she stepped through the door. The woman would collapse onto the couch, smelling of strangers and smoke, muttering, "Stop whining. You'll be fine." But she didn't feel fine. She felt hollow, like something had scooped her insides out and left her body behind. There were nights she curled beside the broken window, head pressed to her knees, trying to remember what it felt like to be full. But hunger wasn't the worst part. Loneliness was, the kind that wrapped around her ribs like cold hands. She kept going. She always kept going. Until the night everything changed. She was 10, small, brittle, shivering behind a butcher's shop after being chased away from a restaurant's trash bin. The sky had been a deep, bruised blue, and snowflakes were beginning to form in the air. Her breath puffed weakly in front of her, little clouds dissolving faster than she could replace them. Her stomach cramped so violently she doubled over, pressing her palms to the frozen ground. And then it happened. Heat bloomed in her hands. A wild, searing burst, as if someone had lit a lantern beneath her skin. She gasped and jerked back, staring at the faint glow spreading across her fingers. The heat grew, pulsing, shaking, begging to escape, and it did. A thin ribbon of silver flame flickered into existence, silent but alive, curling upward in the air like it recognized her even if she didn't recognize it. It was beautiful for a moment, just one moment, before the screaming started. A butcher stepped outside and dropped his cleaver the second he saw her glowing hands. "Witch!" he shouted. "Demon child!" another voice cried behind him. The flame fizzled out instantly, but the damage was already done. Doors slammed, bells rang, people pointed, some threw water, some threw stones. She couldn't control it. She didn't understand it. She didn't even know why it chose her. But the moment the silver fire touched air, her life ended one way and began another. The narrator's voice deepened, sorrowful. They kept their distance, but fear traveled faster than reason. By the next morning, whispers spread through the entire community. Cursed girl. Marked one. Dangerous. Wrong. She learned new kinds of loneliness then. Ones that didn't come from being ignored, but from being noticed too much. By 13, the second shift happened. It was an accident. It always was. A moment of panic when a group of boys cornered her by the barn, mocking her, calling her a freak. They pushed her, one after another, each shove sharper than the last. Something inside her snapped. A thread that had been stretched too thin for too long. Her chest tightened, heat rising through her spine, vision blurring. And then, she wasn't in her skin anymore. Silver light burst outward. Her bones reshaped in a rush that stole her scream. Her claws tore through wood beams. The barn collapsed behind her in a crash of splintered timber. The boys ran. The adults came. Judgment followed. They dragged her out by her arms while she was still shaking, still half-shifted, still terrified of the power she couldn't understand. She begged for someone, anyone, to listen, to help, to believe she hadn't meant to do it. Her mother stood in the doorway of their house, watching, just watching. The girl had called for her. The mother turned away. That silence, more than the screams, more than the accusations, more than the terror, was what broke her. They banished her, sent her into the woods with nothing but the clothes she wore. A child carrying power she didn't want, in a loneliness she didn't deserve. Back in the present, the narrator's voice tightened, pulling us back into the moment where the Alpha King carried her through the storm. Her breath hitched, sharp and pained, as the memory faded. She blinked hard, forcing herself back into her body, back into the freezing rain and the smell of pine and the steady thrum of the Alpha's heartbeat beneath her ear. She whispered the same question she whispered at 13, at 10, at 7, at every age she needed someone to see her. Why do you care? Everyone else said I was a mistake. Her voice was raw, scraped thin by a lifetime of swallowing grief. The Alpha King stopped walking, not slowed, not faltered, stopped. As if her words reached a place inside him he didn't let anyone touch. His jaw tightened, muscles flexing beneath soaked skin, and the forest seemed to press in around them, curious, waiting. The narrator's tone shifted, low and observant. He didn't answer right away. Silence stretched between them, thick enough to feel, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that meant something was fighting inside him. Something old, something wounded, something sharp. For a moment, the storm softened, as if giving them space. He looked down at her, his glowing eyes no longer just gold, but threaded with something darker, heavier. Recognition, rage, sadness, a storm of his own. She saw it, she felt it, and it scared her. Not because he meant her harm, but because he didn't. He adjusted his grip, pulling her closer without asking. She tensed instinctively, but he didn't loosen his hold. He carried her like someone who had already decided something important, even if he hadn't said it aloud. The narrator's voice dipped, confiding. He walked on, muscles coiled, breath steady but strained. She could feel the tension rolling off him, the kind that came from old memories, pressing against fresh ones. The kind that suggested her words had opened a wound he thought he buried long ago. Rain dripped from his hair onto her cheek, warm despite the cold. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't look at him either. It felt dangerous to meet his eyes again. Dangerous in a way that wasn't about fear of him, but fear of what she felt near him, Near him, she didn't feel invisible. Near him, she didn't feel cursed. Near him, something inside her, something small and fragile, lifted its head for the first time in years. Hope. It terrified her more than any enemy that hunted her through the forest. She closed her eyes, whispering, barely audible, but he heard it anyway. I never asked to be this. I never wanted any of it. His voice finally came, low and strained, like gravel dragged across stone. You didn't choose it. Then, softer, almost like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. But I did. The narrator leaned into the weight of those words. She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But the truth pulsed beneath his voice, heavy, ancient, threaded with guilt, and something else she didn't dare name. The Alpha King kept walking, but every step carried the silent echo of his confession, and she lay in his arms, not knowing whether to fear it or hold on to it with everything she had left. The past still clung to her like a second skin, shadows of hunger, cold nights, and the sting of being unwanted. But for the first time, someone didn't turn away. He looked back. He stayed. He carried her through the storm. And that terrified her in a way she didn't know how to survive. But maybe, just maybe, that was the point. The storm began to thin as the Alpha King carried her deeper into the forest. Yet the rain did not stop so much as retreat. It slid off the leaves in gentle sheets, trickling harmlessly down the trunks of ancient trees. The wind quieted, as if holding its breath. And the deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to rearrange itself in anticipation. Something waited ahead, something old, something that recognized her long before she knew it existed. The Alpha's boots slowed as the path widened into an open clearing, circular, impossibly perfect, as though no mortal hand had ever touched it. Grass glistened beneath faint moonlight. Stone monoliths rose from the earth in a ring, each one taller than 5 men standing on each other's shoulders. Their surfaces were etched with markings that shimmered with a soft, pulsing glow. Runes carved in languages lost before either of them was born. The narrator's voice deepened, reverent. This was no ordinary grove. This was a place where the world bent, where the boundary between the seen and unseen thinned, where prophecy breathed. The Alpha King paused at the threshold, as though crossing into this place demanded permission. His breath fogged the air. The rain stuttered above them, then vanished entirely, caught by an invisible barrier that wrapped around the grove like a protective dome. He shifted her weight in his arms, his gaze flickering to the stones with something close to humility. That alone was startling. There were few things in the world that made an Alpha King bow his head, even slightly. Yet here, even his power seemed small. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy from pain and exhaustion. She lifted her head just enough to sense the change in the air. It tasted different, rich, full, metallic, like moonlit steel, and warm, like earth beneath sunlight. Her pulse quickened, though she didn't understand why. The Alpha stepped forward. The grove breathed. Runes on the stones brightened. Moonlight thickened into swirling mist. The wind whirled like a distant echo of voices. And then, when her bare foot brushed the grass, everything ignited. The narrator's voice softened with awe. Light burst beneath her like a ripple of dawn, soft, silver, spreading outward in a wave that illuminated every blade of grass. The moss at her feet glowed a deep, iridescent green. Even the air shimmered, as though the space around her recognized her presence and responded with reverence. The Alpha King stiffened, not in fear, not in surprise, in knowing, as if he had expected this, as if he had been waiting for it. He lowered her gently onto her feet, supporting her with both hands so she wouldn't collapse. The moment her soles pressed against the illuminated moss, the runes across the grove flared brighter, creating a circle of spiraling symbols that climbed up the stones like living fire. Her breath caught, the world tilted, warmth pulsed through her legs and spread up her spine. Gentle but demanding, ancient but intimate, she whispered, voice trembling, "What is this place?" His answer came softly, with a gravity that made the air feel thick. "Where your story began, and where it was always meant to lead." The narrator lingered on the weight of those words. She wanted to pull away, to step back, to reject the eerie familiarity of this place, but she couldn't. Her feet felt rooted, as though the earth itself held her in place, unwilling to let her run again. The runes continued to glow brighter, until the entire grove pulsed like a massive heartbeat. The trees surrounding them bent their branches inward, forming a natural canopy. Leaves rustled with a sound that wasn't quite wind, more like whispering, more like chanting. Her chest tightened. "No," she murmured. "No, this is wrong. I'm not meant to be here." The Alpha did not look away from her. His voice was steady, but roughened by something unspoken. "You were born for this." She flinched as if he had struck her. Born for what? Pain? Fear? Running? That's all I've ever known. The narrator's tone softened, carrying the ache of her words. The stones answered before he could. A low hum vibrated through the ground, rising through her feet, curling into her bones. The mist thickened, swirling into shapes that held form, but not substance. Silhouettes of wolves, of women, of flames, of things too old to name. Their outlines flickered like memories caught in shifting light. One of the shapes leaned closer, its presence neither threatening nor kind, simply existing with intent. It touched the air near her heart, its silhouette shimmering, and suddenly, words boomed across the grove. Not in a voice, not in any language she knew. Not from the Alpha, not from the trees, from everywhere, from the earth, from the prophecy carved into time itself. The child of the flame. The words were low, resonant, carried by wind and stone, born from starvation and sorrow. Her knees wavered. The Alpha steadied her. "Shall rise to burn the darkness." Light flared beneath her feet, circling up her legs in spirals. "Or consume the world in ruin." The narrator let the prophecy settle like dust over still air. She shook her head violently, tears forming before she understood why. "No, no, that's not me. That can't be me." The grove responded with another thrum, almost like disagreement. A pulse of energy rippled through the stones, making the runes flare white-hot. She staggered back, but the ground lit up with each step she took, recognizing her, claiming her, marking her. The fear in her eyes deepened. She whispered, "I don't want this. I don't want to hurt anyone." The Alpha's hand tightened on her arm, not painful, but grounding. His gaze locked onto hers, fierce yet unbearably gentle. "You think your power is meant only for destruction." She looked away, ashamed. "That's all it's ever done. He shook his head once, firmly. That's all you've been allowed to believe. The narrator's voice dipped, carrying truth. She had never considered another possibility. Not when the world had only ever shown her fear, suspicion, cruelty. But here, under ancient moonlight, surrounded by magic older than kingdoms, something in her began to crack open. A possibility, a question, a flicker of something she'd never felt before. Not hope, not yet, but awareness. The grove pulsed again, softer this time, almost like encouragement. The alpha stepped closer, not imposing, not demanding, just present, a steady force in a world that had only ever pushed her away. His voice dropped to a near whisper. This place answers only to truth. Let it show you yours. The narrator guided the mood as the grove shifted. A beam of moonlight, thicker than natural light, shimmering like spun silver, streamed down from the sky through the canopy. It circled her body like smoke, tracing every line of her, illuminating the marks beneath her skin she never knew existed. Symbols emerged slowly, glowing beneath the surface of her arms, her ribcage, her collarbone. Not tattoos, not scars, birthmarks, or destiny made flesh. She gasped. What are those? Your lineage, the alpha murmured. Your birthright. A shiver rolled down her spine. The symbols pulsed again, brighter, more insistent. Her voice cracked. Why me? The answer came not from him this time, but the grove itself. Because you survived. The narrator let the silence afterward swell, palpable and intimate. Every step she took, every hunger pain she endured, every cruel word thrown at her, every night she spent alone, every flicker of silver flame that terrified her, all of it, every shard of her suffering, was written here in the runes beneath her skin. The grove recognized her. The prophecy named her. The power within her stirred. She trembled, overwhelmed by the weight of it. I'm no savior, she whispered. I'm barely holding myself together. The alpha's voice cut through the mist, low and unyielding. Great power doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It's forged in fire, in hunger, in loss. You are what the prophecy warned of, and what it waited for. His eyes, those ancient, gold-lit eyes, held hers with an intensity that made her breath stutter. You are not a mistake, he said, each word precise and heavy. You are the consequence. She blinked at him, shocked. The consequence of what? He hesitated, only for a heartbeat. But in that sliver of time, the grove reacted again, pulling threads of memory from her mind and weaving them into the mist. Images flickered in the air around them. A woman with eyes like hers, a man blurred by light, voice lost to wind, a cradle surrounded by fire, a night full of screams, a baby left alone, her breath hitched. What is that? Your beginning, he murmured. She shook her head, stepping back instinctively, but the earth lit beneath her again, refusing to release her. The narrator's tone grew soft, as though speaking into her breaking heart. She had spent her entire life believing she came from nothing, that her hunger, her loneliness, her power, all of it, were accidents woven from misfortune and neglect. But the grove whispered otherwise. You were meant, you were chosen, you were hidden, you were feared. She dropped to her knees, palms pressed against the glowing ground, tears falling silently onto illuminated moss. I don't want to destroy anything, she whispered. I don't want to be a threat. The alpha knelt beside her, close enough that their breaths mingled in the cool air. His voice softened, threaded with something that made her chest tighten. You are not the threat. His gaze lifted to the swirling mist above them, the shapes shifting faster now, forming patterns, warnings, omens. The threat is what hunts you. The narrator allowed the pause to stretch, letting the weight of his words sink. She swallowed hard. The wolves in the forest? No. His answer was immediate, absolute. Something older, something that knows your power is awakening. Her pulse spiked. What does it want? His gaze darkened. To claim you. The grove answered with a violent flicker, runic symbols flaring red, for the briefest moment before returning to silver. She flinched. The alpha braced her. It was becoming clear. Her destiny wasn't simply about power. It was about war. A war that began before she was born. A war she was never supposed to survive long enough to enter. The narrator's voice became a quiet echo. She lifted her trembling hands, staring at the faint glow beneath her skin. Magic she never wanted, tied to a prophecy she never asked for. I can't do this alone, she whispered, almost to herself. The alpha leaned closer, voice low, steady, undeniable. And you won't. When she looked up at him, something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Awe, fear, recognition, and something deeper she didn't dare articulate. The grove pulsed once more, sealing the moment. Prophecy didn't ask if she was ready. Destiny didn't ask if she agreed. The world had already chosen whether she would rise to burn the darkness or let the darkness burn through her. That choice was the only one left, and the night held its breath, waiting to see which she would become. He doesn't see her run at first, not because she's fast. Her body is still wounded, lungs frayed, steps uneven, but because for the first time since he entered the grove, the Alpha King is staring at the council with a kind of disbelief that almost steals his instinct. He can't understand how they look at her and see a weapon instead of a person, how they speak of her as if she isn't standing right there, bleeding on soil older than their pack lines. But the rebels don't pause. They surge forward, drenched in fury, their snarls echoing through the ancient grove. Branches sway violently, as though the forest itself recoils from their rage. Shouts rise. Kill the girl! Before she lights the prophecy. She's the match that ends us all. End her, and end the curse. The grove responds before she does. Light flickers beneath her feet. Quick, terrified sparks. Not flames of power, but flames of panic. They scatter across the runes, like frightened birds. And that is what makes the council step toward her. Not the wolves attacking, not the rebels tearing through vines, but the trembling light under her toes. A reminder that she is something they cannot predict, and therefore something they cannot control. The council leader's voice slices through the chaos. Hand her over. It isn't a request. It isn't even a threat. It is an announcement, spoken by someone who believes the decision should already be done. The elder with the jagged scar across his jaw steps closer, pointing a shaking finger at her. Shaking not from age, but from pure disgust. She burned her own mother's home, he spits. The accusation hits harder than any strike. Her breath folds in on itself. The light beneath her feet dims, collapsing inward like a star imploding. The Alpha King turns, slowly, dangerously, toward the elder. The look in his eyes is not golden this time. It is something darker, something primal, something that warns every wolf present that their king is seconds away from tearing someone apart. But the elder keeps talking. She is cursed. She is the flame child. She is the mistake. Your kingdom will never survive. The word lands like a blade, pressed directly to her heart. Mistake. It is the same tone her mother used when she was a little girl, sobbing outside the door because she had accidentally cracked a plate while washing it. It is the same tone the townsfolk used when silver sparks shot from her palms at age 10, and they screamed that she was an omen. It is the same tone the pack used when her uncontrolled shift destroyed the barn, and they dragged her into the mud and told her never to return. Mistake. Her chest aches in a way even the wounds on her ribs cannot match. The alpha steps in front of her, a barrier of muscle, fury, and silent promises. But she can't look at him, can't look at anybody. The grove spins. Her breath trembles. Her fingers twitch with sparks that only worsen the panic. Every heartbeat sounds like a fist slamming against her skull. She tries to swallow the rising shame, but it swells like a tide. "I didn't burn it," she whispers, but her voice is so small, so fractured, that even she barely hears it. For a moment, the world seems to pause. She drops her gaze to the earth. "I didn't burn it," she repeats, softer, as if telling the ground rather than the people around her. But the elder scoffs, leans forward, bares his teeth. "Liar!" The word feels like a hand grabbing her by the throat, and that is when she breaks. Her shoulders curl inward, her eyes burn. Her body trembles with the familiar instinct to fold into herself until she disappears completely. She feels 12 again, small, hungry, terrified, begging a mother who refused to open the door. She feels 10 again, scared of her own hands, wondering why everyone stared at her like she was a monster. She feels 13 again, skin raw from being dragged across rough soil, listening to a pack decide she was not worth protecting. To hear it again, from the men who claim to guard the kingdom, it is too much, too loud, too heavy, too cruel. The alpha turns toward her, reaching, but she steps back. It isn't defiance. It isn't anger. It is heartbreak in motion. Her voice shakes. "Maybe they're right." And the instant she says it, something inside her collapses. Lightning cracks across the sky. The grove blazes with white-blue light, illuminating every tree, every blade of grass, every stunned face. She flinches, instinctively raising a hand, as if shielding herself from the world's judgment. Then, before the alpha can catch her wrist, before the council can cage her with demands, before the rebels can take advantage, she runs, not fast, not skillfully, not with power guiding her, just desperately. A fragile, wounded sprint powered by pure emotion. The alpha curses under his breath, a sound that is rarely heard, but the council blocks his path, stepping between him and the doorway of vines she vanished through. "You chase her," the elder warns, "and this kingdom falls by dawn." The alpha's voice rumbles, low and threatening. "Move!" They don't. Rebels circle with new confidence, sensing political hesitation and biting into it like wolves attacking fresh prey. Their accusations rise in a jagged chorus. "She will destroy us all. She carries the flame of ruin. She is proof the prophecy is waking. She must die. Tonight." The alpha moves his right foot a fraction. It is barely a shift in stance, but it makes every rebel flinch. He doesn't roar. He doesn't bare his teeth. He speaks with a calm that is far more terrifying. If any of you touch her, I will burn your line from the chronicles. No one breathes, but the damage is done. Fear spreads through the grove in poisonous waves. The council murmurs, glancing among themselves. They are not just afraid of the girl. They are afraid of the king, of the emotion she awakens in him. They see it now, what they wanted to deny. He cares, not casually, not politically, not as a king protecting a valuable asset, but deeply, instinctively, dangerously. And in their fear, they whisper the one word that sets the forest on edge. Mate. The alpha stiffens. Even the trees seem to lean closer, as if listening. It is a word that binds destinies, not politics. A word that threatens alliances and traditions. A word that could break kingdoms. He remains silent, but his silence is louder than any confession. She doesn't hear any of it. She is far from the grove now, tearing through branches that lash her skin, lungs aching with every breath. Rain coats her face, not the wild rain from before, but a gentler, colder drizzle that feels almost like pity. The world blurs around her. She doesn't know where she is running, only that she must get away from accusations, away from prophecy, away from the alpha's gaze that feels too heavy with meaning she doesn't believe she deserves. She stumbles over a root, catching herself clumsily. Her palms press into the wet soil. Silver sparks twitch near her fingertips. She jerks her hands back, horrified. "No," she whispers. "Not now. Please, not now." The forest doesn't answer, but the earth beneath her pulses, once, gently, like a heartbeat, as if the land itself is calling her back. She shakes her head violently and pushes herself upright, but she is shaking, cold, exhausted, emotionally gutted. She leans against a tree, trying to breathe. Her voice trembles in the darkness. "I can't be what they think I am." Above her, branches sway. Leaves fall around her shoulders. The forest feels strangely alive, as though it is watching her, recognizing her. She squeezes her eyes shut. And in the quiet, a memory rises. Not one she seeks, but one that refuses to remain buried. She is 10, crouched behind the butcher's shop, shivering so violently her teeth clack, staring at her empty hands. In the moment the silver flame burst outward, terrifying, uncontrolled, the townsfolk screamed and fled. The fear in their faces, the disgust in their voices, it branded itself into her bones. She whispers now, voice small and breaking. "I'm not a savior. I'm a danger." She presses a hand to her chest. "And he shouldn't be anywhere near me." Her throat tightens painfully. "No one should." A sob escapes before she can stop it. Back at the grove, the Alpha King finally forces past the council. Rebels retreat instinctively, unwilling to block a king who looks like a storm walking on two legs. He steps through the vines she fled through. The air around him trembles, as if recognizing the shift in his intent. He pauses, only once, just long enough to leave an order behind him. "Anyone who follows me will die." No one argues, and then he vanishes into the forest. She hears him, long before she sees him. Not through sound, he is far too skilled for that, but through something deeper, a pull, a gravity, a thread that coils around her ribs and tugs softly, insistently, like a heartbeat that wants to sync with another. She tries to ignore it. She tries to will it away, but it grows stronger with every passing second. A weight settles in her chest. No, please no, because if he finds her, if he looks at her with that same expression of fear, longing, and something dangerously close to destiny, she doesn't know what will break first, her power or her heart. The forest rustles. She freezes. A shadow moves through the mist. Large, quiet, predatory. Her pulse jumps painfully. He steps into view. The Alpha King, eyes glowing softly through the darkness. Rain dripping from his jawline. Breath steady, but his body tense, as if he has been searching for her with more desperation than he will ever admit. His voice is low, careful, almost wounded. Why did you run? Her breath trembles, and for the first time, she doesn't know whether she is the hunted or the one doing the haunting. He doesn't move at first. He just stands there in the entrance of the cave, framed by the slow drizzle and the faint glow of moon-filtered mist. Water trails down his neck, soaking into the collar of his cloak, but he doesn't seem to feel the cold. His eyes find her instantly. She's sitting on the uneven stone floor, knees pulled to her chest, face buried in her arms. Her breath shakes in quiet, uneven pulls, not sobs. She never lets herself sob, just the kind of crying that hurts more because it's silent. The Alpha's chest rises once, tightly, as if seeing her like this wounds him in a way nothing else does. He steps inside. The cave welcomes him with shadows, damp walls, and the faint echo of her trembling breath. He doesn't rush toward her, doesn't shout her sim or demand she explain herself. He kneels, slowly, quietly, like he's lowering himself before something fragile. His knees touch the stone beside her thigh, but he keeps his hands on his own lap, careful not to intrude, careful not to drown her already overwhelmed senses. For a long moment, he waits. The only sounds are rain dripping outside, her soft, uneven breathing, and the faint, restless crackle of silver sparks, twitching under her fingertips. Finally, she lifts her face. Her eyes are red, wet, unfocused. She looks like she's been shattered inward and is still trying to gather the pieces, unsure if any of them fit the way they used to. He exhales, a slow breath that seems to steady the entire cave. I found you, he murmurs. She shakes her head once, barely more than a twitch. I didn't want you to. His expression shifts, something between pain and restraint. He doesn't reach for her. He waits until she looks at him properly, until her eyes meet his with that lost, wounded glimmer. Only then does he let the truth show in his voice. You're trembling, he whispers. I know. Her voice cracks. I'm trying to stop. He tilts his head, studying the faint fissures of fear threading through her. It's not the fear of enemies, not even the fear of death. It's the fear she holds of herself. Her power flickers, not in a violent, dangerous burst, but in a soft, exhausted shiver. Silver flame coils weakly around her knuckles, then fades. She notices his gaze shift to her hands, and she flinches, pulling them into her chest like she's trying to hide them. I don't know what's wrong with me, she whispers. Something in the Alpha's eyes breaks. He leans closer, not touching her, but letting his presence become a shelter. There's nothing wrong with you. She laughs weakly, humorless, breathless, almost bitter. You saw the grove. You heard them. You know what they think of me. He nods once. He doesn't deny it. They're wrong, he says quietly. She presses her forehead against her knees. Their words don't hurt as much as the fact that I believed them. Rainwater drips faintly from her hair. A small shiver runs through her shoulders. He reaches out, slow, deliberate, and brushes a strand of wet hair away from her face. He waits at the edge of contact, giving her a chance to pull away. She doesn't. Her cheek leans the slightest bit into the warmth of his hand, as though her body has made a decision her mind hasn't caught up with. He lowers himself to sit beside her, his back resting against the cave wall. The space between them is small, intimate, filled with quiet tension and an unspoken question lingering in the air. She wipes her cheek with her sleeve. "You shouldn't be here," she whispers. He studies her profile, the curve of her jaw, the faint quiver of her lip. "You're hiding," he murmurs. "Of course, I should be here." She swallows hard. "No, I mean, you shouldn't be near me. I'm not safe." His breath stills. Then, with a tone both gentle and unyielding, he asks, "Who told you that?" She pulls her knees closer, as if trying to vanish. "Everyone, for years." He turns toward her fully now, his posture no longer kingly or commanding, just deeply, painfully human. "Say it again," he whispers. "But tell me what you believe." Silence stretches. At last, she forces the truth out, barely audible. "I fear myself." He closes his eyes, not from frustration, but from the ache of hearing her say it. A fire crackles softly near the back of the cave, one she must have tried to start earlier. The flame is uneven, flickering silver in places where her touch lingered. She stares at it. "I don't know how to control any of this. I don't know what I am or what that prophecy wants from me. I don't know why the ground glows under my feet or why the trees whisper when I walk past. I don't know why the air bends when my emotions spike." Her breath shudders. "And I don't know why you're looking at me like I'm not about to ruin your entire kingdom." He studies her for a long, thick moment. Then he lifts his hand, not to touch her, but to unfasten the leather guard around his forearm. He slides it off, revealing a long scar carved diagonally across his wrist. The wound is old, but healed unevenly, ridged and pale. She stares, for the first time forgetting her guilt long enough to be surprised. He shifts his wrist closer to the firelight so she can see it clearly. "This is where my first mate died," he says softly. Her eyes widen. He doesn't look away from the flame. "She was ambushed during a raid. I wasn't fast enough to save her. I got there just in time to watch her bleed out, and every wolf in the kingdom blamed me for it." His jaw tightens. "So did I." The cave feels smaller, heavier, thicker, with the kind of honesty no one expects from a king. He exhales slowly. "Every day since, I've carried two truths, one that the kingdom sees and one that I bury inside myself." She swallows. "What truths?" He looks at her, really looks. "The kingdom says I failed her." His voice lowers. "I say, I never forgave myself for surviving her." She stares at him, stunned by the rawness in his words. He lifts his other hand and places it palm up on the ground between them, an offering, not a demand. "I know what it feels like to fear yourself," he murmurs, "to worry that everything you touch will end in pain." Her breath catches. He leans slightly closer, careful, gentle. "And I know what it looks like when someone carries guilt that was never theirs to bear." Her eyes sting again. But this time, it isn't from shame. It's from the unnerving realization that he sees her clearly, too clearly. Without looking away, she whispers, "I didn't burn my mother's house." "I know," he murmurs. Her lips part. "The elder said—" "The elder wasn't there," he interrupts softly. "But I saw the truth in your face before he even spoke the lie." A quiet tremor runs through her. He shifts again, his shoulders brushing hers lightly. When she doesn't pull back, his posture softens. "Look at me," he whispers. She does. He inhales, the sound barely louder than the fire crackling between them. "You said you don't know how to trust someone who could destroy you." His voice dips, warm and unguarded. "I don't want to destroy you." Her breath falters. "I want to understand you." The cave stills. Her heartbeat races painfully against her ribs. It's too much. His closeness, his voice, the warmth radiating off him. The way the firelight glows gold against his jaw. She looks down. Her hand has drifted closer to his without her noticing. Close enough that if either of them moved a fraction, their fingers would touch. She jerks her hand back, but he catches it gently, not forcefully, not possessively, just enough to ask her silently, not to run. Her fingertips spark, faint and silver. She stares at their hands, frightened. It's happening again. His thumb brushes the back of her knuckles in a slow, steady circle. "It's not." Her brows knit. "It's just your heartbeat reacting." He lifts her hand to the space between them, letting their joined fingers hover over the firelight. "Not your power." She watches their shadows dance on the cave wall. Her voice breaks again. "What if I hurt you?" He lifts her chin with his free hand, gentle, steady. "Then I'll heal." "And if I can't undo it?" His eyes soften, golden light swirling in their depths. "Then I'll be the one who takes the blow, not you." Her lips part, trembling. "And if I hurt the kingdom?" He sits closer, their knees now touching. "Then we will rebuild it together." The words hit her like a breath she didn't know she needed. Her body leans toward him, slowly, uncertainly, pulled by something she doesn't understand. Their foreheads almost touch. Her breath mixes with his. The warmth of his skin draws her in like a promise. His lips hover a whisper away from hers. She tilts her face, almost giving in. But at the last second, she flinches. "I can't," she breathes. He doesn't pull away. He just lowers his forehead to hers, letting their breaths blend in the quiet dark. "I'm not asking for your trust," he whispers. "Not yet," she trembles. "Then what are you asking for?" His voice slips into something deeper, something that feels like a vow, a chance. Her eyes close. "A chance to prove," he murmurs, "that you are not meant to be feared, but understood." The fire crackles softly. Her hand rests in his, no longer shaking. The tension between them settles. Not gone, not weakened, but transformed into something warmer, more dangerous, something like beginning. The journey back to the pack was quiet at first, too quiet. Even the rain had stopped, leaving a damp, heavy fog that clung to the trees like a shroud. She walked beside him, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. Every step felt heavier than the last, like she was dragging the weight of years, of memories, of survival itself. The Alpha King stayed beside her, careful, patient, yet tense. His cloak brushed hers occasionally, and she felt the spark of warmth from him the same warmth that had pulled her out of the cave, that had held her hand beside the fire. But this warmth now felt dangerous, because hope was a fragile, combustible thing, and she didn't know if she could survive another betrayal. The pack territory came into view, a sprawling village nestled within the forest, walls carved from ancient oak and stone. At first glance, it looked peaceful. Wolves roamed the outskirts. Children played near the edges, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. But she knew better. She had seen what civilized facades hid, and her instincts screamed that the world inside those walls was about to crumble around her. They reached the gates, and the air shifted immediately. The council was waiting. Elders in ceremonial garb, expressions sharp and unreadable. The whispers began before anyone spoke. "She's here. The flame child. The cursed one." Each murmur, each sidelong glance, felt like a knife slicing through her chest. She tightened her fists. Silver sparks flickered along her fingers, uncontrolled, a reflection of her rising panic. The Alpha noticed, but his eyes didn't betray the usual anger or fear. They were sharp, assessing, calculating. He was trying to gauge the danger, but she could see the storm behind them, the storm that mirrored her own. The council leader stepped forward. Not the elder who had accused her in the grove before, but someone older, taller, a shadow of authority that loomed over everyone. The voice was calm, deliberate, and that made it even worse. "Child of the flame," he said, voice slicing the air, "your presence here is complicated. We have revelations you must hear." She clenched her teeth. Her heartbeat slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to run, but she didn't. She couldn't. She had to hear what they had to say. And part of her, a small, foolish part, hoped they would be different this time, that they might see her as she truly was, not a weapon, not a threat, not a mistake. Then the words hit. They didn't build up. They didn't soften. They struck like silver daggers. "Your mother," the council leader began, "sold you to an ancient cult when you were a child. In exchange for power." He paused, letting the weight of it sink into her chest. "You were marked by the silver flame at their altar. It was never natural. It was a binding." Her stomach dropped. Her legs trembled. She stumbled backward, barely catching herself on the edge of the wall. The Alpha reached for her, but she flinched, pulling away instinctively. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." But it was worse. The whispers around her grew louder, and then someone else, another council member, spoke with venom that cut through the murmurs. "And the prophecy has shifted." They leaned in, eyes glinting. "The flame child will burn the Alpha King alive." The words echoed through the courtyard. Every wolf present stiffened. Every whisper turned to gasps. The children stopped playing. The elders' faces tightened. And in the center of it all, she froze. Her vision blurred, her chest constricted. She could feel the silver flame rise like liquid fire under her skin. Her body wanted to explode. Her mind screamed. Her heart shattered. The Alpha froze. Just a few steps away, but not advancing. Not calling her back. Not saying it couldn't be true. He just stared. His hesitation was worse than any accusation, worse than the council's venom. Because in that split second, she realized he didn't know if he could protect her. He didn't know if he could survive her. And that realization destroyed her. She inhaled sharply, and then let the flames rise. Silver fire erupted from her fingertips, shooting into the air with a sound like tearing metal. The ground cracked beneath her feet. Small stones flew as if the earth itself rejected her presence. The crowd screamed. Wolves scattered. Children cried. Elders cursed and fell to their knees, shielding themselves from the raw power that pulsed like a living thing in the courtyard. The Alpha shouted her name, deep, commanding, but she couldn't hear him. She was lost to the fury inside her, the betrayal, the humiliation, the terror, and the grief that had been building for years. And then, without another thought, she ran. Silver flames trailed from her hands, illuminating the forest beyond the pack grounds. Branches snapped underfoot. Rain began to fall again, hissing against the flames that followed her like desperate spirits. Behind her, the pack and the council were frozen. The Alpha stood motionless at the gates, golden eyes blazing, torn between duty and desire. The weight of her betrayal and his hesitation pressed down on him. He wanted to follow. He wanted to take her into his arms and tell her she was not alone. But the fire in her wake warned him that any wrong step would burn them both. She didn't stop running, not for breath, not for the pain in her ribs, not for the silver flames lapping at her fingertips. She ran through the forest, through mud and shadows, through rain that stung her wounds, and whipped her hair across her face. The silver flame responded to her panic, flickering uncontrollably, almost sentient, almost alive, almost screaming with her. And then she collapsed, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything she'd just learned. Her body shivered violently. Her nails dug into the earth, her teeth ground together, trying to hold back the sobs. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did they, all of them, lie to me? Why did they sell me? Why did they mark me? Why does everything hurt?" Silver sparks spiraled up into the night sky, illuminating the forest canopy with a pale, unearthly glow. Somewhere far above, a branch cracked, and the sound made her jump violently. She felt watched. She knew she was being hunted, but this time, not by the pack or the council. Something darker had begun to stir. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was meaningless in the haze of panic and fury. She stumbled into a clearing near the mountains, barely noticing the jagged rocks beneath her bare feet. The wind picked up, carrying with it whispers that weren't her own, ancient voices, calling her name, taunting, coaxing, reminding her of the fire within. And then, from the distance, she saw them, figures moving through the mountain mists, robed, cloaked, silent as shadows, agents of the cult who had shaped her destiny before she even understood it. Their eyes glowed faintly under hoods. They whispered in languages she almost understood. The blood in her veins screamed in recognition. They had come for her, not to reason, not to beg, not to negotiate. They wanted to drain her power, to awaken something old, something hungry, something the world was not ready for. The forest trembled with their presence, and in that moment, everything changed. She was no longer a child. She was no longer hunted by petty pack politics or council fears. She was something else, something alive, something powerful, something untamed. Silver flames erupted from her hands, larger now, brighter. She raised them to the sky, feeling the energy coursing through her veins like molten rivers. The mountains themselves seemed to react, shadows twisting, stones shivering, wind rising to a deafening roar. She was no longer running, she was returning, and at that moment, the Alpha appeared behind her, golden eyes glowing, cloak whipping in the stormy wind, hands outstretched, not to hold, but to mirror her power, to align with her energy, to stand with her against whatever came next. Their connection flared, gold and silver intertwining like fire meeting lightning. The air crackled with their joined presence, dangerous and divine. She turned slowly, letting the full weight of her gaze meet his. For the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen. She took a step forward, then another, and then, with a roar that split the night, she released her full power. Silver flames spiraled high into the clouds. Ancient runes, etched in mountain walls, ignited. The sky split open with streaks of silver lightning. The earth itself seemed to bow, tremble, and awaken under her feet. The cult shrieked, recoiling. They had never anticipated this. They had marked her as a child, thinking her power could be controlled. Now they realized she was beyond control. She raised her hands higher, silver fire lashing outward. "You used my childhood, my hunger, my pain," she shouted, voice cracking like thunder. "You made me into a weapon without asking, but I am not your weapon. I am not your sacrifice, and I will not be your tool for ancient monsters." The cult faltered, fear flashing in their hidden eyes. The Alpha stepped beside her, golden energy coiling around him, flames meeting his aura like molten sunlight against silver lightning. Together, they were unstoppable. The mountains shivered, the clouds swirled. The storm answered them, not with destruction, but recognition. Ancient magic, long dormant, woke to witness the union of gold and silver, Alpha and Flame Child. In the midst of chaos, the cult's high priest appeared, his face twisted in malice and triumph. "The Child of the Flame will finally serve her master," he shouted, arms raised. "The ancient beast will awaken." She raised her hands, silver fire spiraling, surrounding them both in a cyclone of light. Her gaze locked on the man who had shaped her destiny before she even knew what it meant. "You marked me," she hissed. "You lied to me. You enslaved me. You used me. And now you will see that I am not yours. I am mine." The Alpha's voice joined hers, deep and unyielding. "Your beast does not awaken today, not while we stand." The high priest faltered, and for the first time, doubt flickered across his features. Silver flames, golden energy, mountains shuddering, the night alive with power. This was no longer a girl running barefoot through mud, no longer a frightened child begging for bread, no longer a pawn in the schemes of the ancient or the elders. This was a queen of fire and storm, a warrior shaped by hunger, pain, betrayal, and love, a force that refused to be caged. And beside her, the Alpha stood, gold and silver intertwined, an equal, a mirror, a bond that the world could neither break nor ignore. The final confrontation was inevitable. The cult had underestimated her. The pack had underestimated her. And the high priest, the man who thought he had written her destiny, would soon learn the cost of trying to control fire that refuses to be tamed. The air was heavy with ash and rain, the scent of scorched earth clinging to her skin. Silver sparks still lingered along her arms. Fading slowly, as if reluctant to leave, She stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the forest that had witnessed both her flight and her wrath. Below, the packlands stretched, quiet now, the fires of the battle dimming, smoke curling into the night sky like faint ghosts of what had been. Wind tore at her hair, whipping it across her face, stinging her eyes, pulling at the edges of her soaked cloak. She didn't flinch. She didn't move. Her chest heaved with exhaustion and adrenaline, and every inhale carried the echo of all she had lost and all she had finally taken back. Her gaze swept across the horizon. The mountains stood silent, massive, eternal, observers of a world that had changed in a single night. And yet, despite the devastation, despite the silver flames and gold energy coiling in the sky moments ago, there was a hollow ache in her chest, a question that no one, not even the Alpha beside her, could answer. The Alpha King stepped forward, silent, his golden aura now soft, settling around him like quiet embers. He stood close, yet she could feel the space between them, the distance carved by fear, by past betrayals, by truths too heavy to speak aloud. His gaze held hers for a long moment, measuring, weighing, understanding, not judgment, not command, just recognition. He whispered, voice low, hesitant, You survived." She shook her head slightly, bitter laughter catching in her throat. "No," she said softly, almost to herself. "I didn't survive. I burned." Her words were more than literal. They carried the weight of years of hunger, of abandonment, of betrayal by mother, pack, and council alike. They carried the weight of the cult's manipulation, of every whispered lie she had been forced to believe. They carried the raw truth of a girl who had been made into a weapon, and finally decided she would not be a pawn any longer. The wind swept harder, flinging rain and ash around her like a silver storm. Her eyes glowed faintly, the silver flame refusing to leave entirely, a living reminder of who she was and what she could do. She looked at him, her voice quieter now, almost fragile. Would anyone choose me if they knew everything? The hunger, the fire, the destruction. The Alpha's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from him, golden and steady. "I would," he said simply. "And I already have." Her eyes flickered with something she hadn't felt in years: vulnerability, hope, and the tiniest spark of fear. Because she knew how dangerous hope could be. She had been burned by trust before, betrayed by those who claimed to care. And yet, standing there, seeing him illuminated by faint starlight, golden aura blending with silver residue on her skin, she felt the impossible tug of something new, something terrifyingly real. The cliff beneath her trembled faintly, a reminder that the world itself had shifted. She could feel the forest below watching, the mountains listening, the winds carrying whispers that were no longer just echoes of the past. And she could feel the pull of destiny, tightening around her chest like invisible chains she refused to break. "Are you afraid of me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Not from fear of his judgment, but fear of herself. The Alpha had stood beside her through storms, fires, and betrayals. But could anyone truly survive the power that burned in her veins? He looked at her, eyes unreadable, deep pools of gold that seemed to see beyond flesh and bone, into the soul that had been forged in hunger and pain. "Afraid?" he murmured, voice soft but unyielding. "Afraid, yes, but I am not running. Not from you, not from what you are. I see you, every piece of you, the pain, the fire, the hunger, and I choose you anyway." Her breath caught, her chest tightened. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, though she didn't move to wipe them away. This recognition, this acceptance, it was dangerous, terrifying. And the quiet vulnerability it awakened inside her made her tremble more than any battle or fire ever could. The wind shifted again, carrying a distant, almost imperceptible voice. She didn't recognize it at first. Then the words threaded through the night like silk and steel. Would you have chosen her? Or feared her too? It wasn't her thoughts. It wasn't the alphas. It was something beyond. A question whispered by the universe itself, asking all who watched, if you stood at the edge of power and pain, would you step forward or recoil? Her silver flames flickered in response, as if the wind itself had breathed life into them once more. The fire wasn't just power, it was memory, it was survival. It was the culmination of years of hunger, abuse, rejection, and finally, self-acceptance. She clenched her fists, letting the energy pulse through her veins. Unsteady, wild, alive, the alpha stood beside her, silent, but present, a solid anchor in the storm of her chaos. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to control her, didn't ask her to quell the flames. He just let her be. And that, more than anything else, was a gift. A shadow fell across the cliff as a gust of wind bent the trees below. Something ancient stirred in the forest, silver veins lighting up across the ground in response to the power she carried. The forest itself seemed to tremble with anticipation, watching her, waiting, wondering, what would she do with the force that had once been given to her as a curse? She exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, letting the fire die down to a soft glow that coiled around her wrists like serpents. The alpha glanced at her, eyes softening, golden light mingling with the faint silver sparks on her skin. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, almost reverently, "I stand with you, not as a king, not as a savior, not as anyone who could command you, but as someone who chooses to see you, even when the world doesn't." The words struck her like a tidal wave. Her lips parted, and for a moment, she felt the fragile bloom of hope stretching inside her chest. And yet, the lingering weight of the night, the battle, the betrayal, and the lingering shadows of the cult reminded her this was not over. No, the war had ended, but the story had only begun. The alpha's gaze turned toward the horizon, golden eyes narrowing as he sensed something she couldn't yet see. "Something else is coming," he murmured. "Something that won't wait for either of us." Her heart clenched at the uncertainty, yet she stood taller, drawing strength from the bond between them, from the fire that had been hers all along, from the unspoken promise that she was not alone. The cliff beneath their feet quaked again, more violently this time. Silver light pulsed from the veins in the forest below, spreading like liquid fire, illuminating the trees, the mountains, the distant packlands. And then a voice, low, ominous, carrying a weight that made her pulse quicken, whispered from the shadows beyond the cliff. "She is not the only one." Her silver flame flared instinctively, twisting in reaction, coiling around her arms, fingertips burning with raw energy. The alpha's hand moved to her back, a grounding, steadying force. "You hear that?" he asked. "I do," she said, voice tight with apprehension. A pause. Then another whisper, sharper, more commanding. "The true alpha hasn't risen yet." The wind howled, the cliff trembled, and in that instant, both of them understood. The battles they had fought, the betrayals she had endured, the flames she had wielded, none of it was the end. It was merely the beginning. The forest shimmered under the silver veins, the mountains casting long shadows over lands that had never truly been safe. The fire inside her stirred once more, hungry, alive, demanding recognition, not as a weapon, but as a force that would shape the world in her own image. She looked at the alpha, his golden aura reflecting the dying silver sparks along her skin, and for the first time, allowed herself a flicker of certainty. I am ready," she whispered. "Ready for whatever comes next." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. "Then we face it together," he said. "Whatever rises, whatever falls, together." The wind carried the voices again, distant, almost chanting, almost teasing, almost warning. And for a moment, the world held its breath. The cliff, the forest, the mountains, all paused to witness the union of fire and gold, of survival and choice, of power and trust. And somewhere beyond the horizon, in the shadowed recesses of the land, ancient forces stirred, sensing a new chapter in the story of the Flame Child and the Alpha King. A chapter that had only just begun, but whose echoes would shake the foundations of kingdoms, packs, and hearts alike. Her hair whipped around her face, her fingers burned faintly, her heart raced, and in the silence, the question lingered, haunting and lyrical. Would you have chosen her? Or feared her too? The cliff seemed to pulse in answer, the wind carrying it outward, the silver veins glowing brighter, painting the forest below in fleeting, spectral light. And in that moment, the choice, whether for fear, for love, or for destiny, was left to all who watched, all who listened, all who dared to step into the story. The Alpha King placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. "Come," he said softly, yet with authority. "The night isn't finished, and neither are we." Together, they turned from the cliff, leaving the ruins behind, the smoke and ash curling toward the sky, the echoes of the battle fading, but not disappearing. Their steps were measured, deliberate, and yet every movement carried the tension of unspoken promise, the anticipation of trials yet to come, and the unbreakable bond forged in fire, blood, and silver flame. And somewhere in the shadows, watching, waiting, a figure whispered again, voice almost drowned by the wind, "She is not the only one." And a second voice followed, "The true Alpha hasn't risen yet." The night held its breath, the world waited, and the story burned brighter than ever. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Velvet Romance Library. Here, we tell tales that burn and heal.